And the benefit of doing this is that the more relaxed your child is, the more he or she will absorb. Your child doesn't have to sit still at a desk or table to learn these things. In fact, depending on the child, it may be very counterproductive. Alphabet letter names and sounds. This can be started as early as 3 years old at a relaxed pace. The following 4 strategies can be used for 3 to 7-year-olds and can be used simultaneously to make sure you are reaching your child no matter what his or her learning style may be. The first strategy is what I like to call the wall strategy. This strategy does require a little bit of preparation in the beginning, but afterwards all you need is 5 minutes a day, 3 to 5 times a week. Put up a small to medium-sized alphabet with no pictures on it in a frequently used location. Mine was next to the kitchen table for the longest time. I took 5 minutes to make these alphabet cards by hand on half-size index cards. If you don't have space for this, the second best option is a notebook like this. Also, buy a package of picture cards. Or you can make your own cards, but that will be more time consuming. The picture cards don't have to have words on them. In fact, it's preferable that they don't. It's also important that the name of the image be easily identifiable. Also, go through the cards and remove any cards like xylophone, X-ray, as well as cards that start with ch, sh, th, and v. Alright, now for how to carry out this strategy with your child. During a relaxed time of the day, I almost always did this during snack time and it worked marvelously, let your child choose 2 to 3 of the picture cards. It doesn't matter which letter sound they belong to. First, identify the name of the image. David, what is this picture? Right, it's a cake. Or if it's an action word or an emotion, make sure to label those. Once you've identified what the picture is very clearly, state to your child, cake begins with the sound k. In that step, you're beginning to teach what beginning sounds are. Notice we have not connected anything to the alphabet yet. We've just talked about what the picture is and what we hear. Now we're going to connect it to letter sounds. Ask, do you know what letter says k? Your child may or may not try to guess one of the letters on the wall. So now at that point, you're going to connect it to the visual letter that is on the wall. You're going to state, the letter C says k. You can either ask, do you know which of those letters is the letter C? And if they say no, go over and point to the letter C and say, this is the letter C. The letter C says k. Then go ahead and tape the card under that corresponding letter and repeat with the next card. After the first few days of this, you can test the waters in the following way. As before, identify the name of the object or image, but then ask, what sound does bike start with or begin with? If your child identifies the correct sound, you can continue with this pattern after that. Your child is already beginning to grasp the first concept of beginning sounds. So have your child go ahead and pull 2 to 3 cards each day and do the same thing. Keep doing this until there are 2 to 4 pictures for each letter of the alphabet, excluding the letter X. This is because the sound of X, x, is only found in the middle or at the end of words. So that's a letter you don't need to worry about. You can teach your child about it later on with ending sounds. As your child begins to learn the letter sounds, they may go up and touch the correct letter when asked which letter makes that sound if they still don't know the letter names. So once you have 2 to 4 letters for each card, you can choose to keep them up and continue adding more cards if you have the space for it, or you can take them down and start all over again. Even if it's with the same exact pictures, that repetitive action is going to take those letters and put them into long-term memory. Remember, modeling and repetition are king when teaching these skills. This is not a sprint, but a marathon. Give your child as much time as needed to learn all the letter sounds and names. So the second strategy is songs on the wall. Before I get into the details, let me clarify. This is not a whole language approach. Whole language approach refers to teaching children to read based on memorizing words as a whole. When used completely by itself, this is a weak reading strategy because children are relying only on the memorization of whole words. And when they see a new word, they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to break it apart by sounds and then put it back together again and figure out the word. So back to what I was saying. Using these songs is not based on a whole language approach because the goal is not the memorization of words as a whole. Your child may memorize some words, and if so, that's fine, but don't make it the goal or the emphasis. So the first step to using this strategy is to choose a song your child will likely connect with quickly. With my kids, I knew songs like the following would engage them really easily. I Like to Eat Apples and Bananas, Bingo, you know the dog, B-I-N-G-O, and Old MacDonald. Maybe for your child, it's The Wheels on the Bus or something else. It's preferable that it either be a short song or that you only write out the first few lines of the song when starting out with this strategy. Otherwise, it gets too long and can lose your child's attention or become overwhelming. The one-stop resource I use to find a plethora of songs is Literacy Beginnings. It's actually a book written for a preschool classroom, but has some sections that can easily be adapted to a homeschool setting. There's a link in the description in case you want to take a closer look at the book, and I have also left a list of the sections or pages that I believe will be the most beneficial to you if you are homeschooling 3 to 6-year-old children. After you have written out the song, introduce it to your child. He or she can be eating a snack as you do, standing next to you by the wall, or sitting at a table. Whatever will keep your child's attention best. I've done all 3 of these at one point or another. Now notice that the song does not have to be written in really big paper. That's usually what you would do for a really large classroom setting with lots of kids where they have to be really far away from the song. For a homeschool setting where it's just 1 or 2 kids and they're not too far away from the song, you can use printer size paper and just write it out with letters that are larger than what you would usually write, so that the child in a later step will be able to easily see the shapes of the letters and trace them. So as you're going to introduce the song to your child, simply say, "I'm going to teach you a song." Model pointing to each word as you sing the song. Do you want to hear it again, you ask? Then sing it again, pointing to the words. A few days later, connect this back to the alphabet on the wall as follows. So your child that day has chosen 3 pictures to put on the wall, and you have identified the sound and modeled what letter it goes with. And your child has then placed them under their beginning sound, letter. So you could say, "You put a picture under T, H, and U today. Now you're going to be a detective and look for one of the letters in our song and trace it." So then you can say to your child, "Which letter do you want to search for?" Let them choose one of the letters from T, H, and U, and show them how to search for the letter in the song. When you find the first letter, model how to trace it. Then let your child trace the other ones found, even if it looks messy. The purpose of this step is to help make them more aware of the shape of that letter and the parts of the letter. So if we're talking about a T, recognizing that a T has a straight line going down and a little line going across. The purpose of this activity is not to make perfect handwriting. Now, as a parenthesis, later you're going to have multiple songs up, and you can get your child to look for the chosen letter in more than one song if you'd like. I also use the strategy of letting my child choose what color they want to use from special smelly markers we only use for special things like this. This was an extra motivation that got them excited about doing this activity. If your child wants to search for the other 2 letters also, that's fine. Adjust how much you do to your child's attention span. Now you may be asking yourself at this point, why not teach 1 letter per week or in a specific order? 1, there's less pressure to memorize the 1 letter in 1 week. It's more natural, it's more engaging. Also, the letter names and sounds are more likely to enter into long-term memory when the child is ready, due to frequent and repeated encounters with each letter over time. If they learn A on week 1 and then don't see it again for 20 weeks, they probably won't remember it and you'll be very frustrated. I've talked to many parents who have taken this approach and found they had this happen. And they couldn't understand why. And sometimes they even felt like maybe there was something wrong with their child. Well, there may not be anything wrong with your child, but if you only look at something for 1 week and then 20 weeks later you see it again, you might not remember it very well either. Using a random order approach like this is also more likely to be interest-led, since children can choose the picture cards that they want to put up and which letter they want to search for in songs you have introduced each day. Choice is a powerful motivator to intrinsic learning, and as a result, you're going to have less fights and struggles with your child to want to learn. Teaching the alphabet this way is also short, to the point, and can be done while having a snack and your child is attentive. It's also more of a natural process. So not only does it have lots of benefits for the process of your child's learning, it also has great benefits for you in that it is less work for you, but it's still very effective. Why do I say less work for you? This is because using the 1 letter per week strategy, typically what parents are needing to do is create a plethora of activities during that week that just focus on that letter. Whereas in this case, you created all the materials at the beginning, and then once in a while you have to write out a song, and that's about it to this point. Now, the theory behind teaching letters in a certain order is so you can teach children to begin to decode words like cat, hat, and had right away. However, to be very blunt about it, I have found this to be putting the cart before the horse. Instead, be patient with the process. Work out those letter names and sounds, and then directly teach decoding later. Directly teaching decoding can wait. So what if your child asks, "Mommy, which letter says th?" If your child does ask something like that, just go ahead and teach it. What I used to say to my children was something like this: "Well, sweetie, sometimes the letters get together and they do funny things. In this case, the T and the H get together and say th. They also say v in words." If this type of scenario does happen to you, this can also be a great time to begin introducing Letterland cards and tell the story behind the mentioned letter combination. Now, if you do introduce Letterland cards to your child, this can also be a great opportunity to introduce the Letterland ABC book. This book will help to reinforce letter sounds and phonological awareness skills of beginning sounds. These Letterland characters will also become very useful down the road as decoding becomes more complex, with all the vowel combinations and consonant combinations that change all the rules. So then, stemming from what you've already been doing with the alphabet letters on the wall and the songs on the wall, throughout the week you can reinforce letter names and sounds during sensory play. And it really comes down to just modeling while your child plays. And the benefit of doing this is that the more relaxed your child is, the more he or she will absorb. Your child doesn't have to sit still at a desk or table to learn these things. In fact, depending on the child, it may be very counterproductive. And typically, if your child is already used to doing sensory bins or activities, they're likely to be very relaxed as they enjoy playing. Some of the sensory activities that I used frequently with my kids during this season of their lives was Play-Doh, paint, watercolors, the rice box, pipe cleaners, popsicle sticks, and window soap. You can even use sensory play times to assess what letters and names your child has already mastered, but don't start assessing too soon. When you've been teaching the alphabet for some time, then you can begin to test the waters and see how it goes. Now, when you do get to the step where you start to test the waters, always check your child's mastery of letters in random order. When I felt my daughter was getting close to that point, I would check during painting time, for example. So she was painting in her section of the large craft paper, and I was painting in mine. And as I was in my section, I began to paint a letter here and there and simply ask her what it is. If I saw that she got tired of it, I would continue with other letters another day. You can also check for mastery of letters with puzzles. As you're working on putting the puzzle together, asking your child, "Hey, I can't find the S. Do you know where the S is?" Or, "I can't find the letter that says, do you know where it is?" And seeing if they can find it and hand it to you. That is evidence that they do already know that sound or letter that you asked them for. And you can also use letters in sensory bins. For example, make sure there are a few letters on top of the rice if you're using a rice bin. Grab one and say, "I found an L, but I can't find an S." Make sure that the S is visible though. "Eileen, can you help me find the S?" If she grabs it and gives it to you, that is evidence that she is mastering that letter. As you assess, when you observe letters that are not mastered, then find ways to emphasize those specific sounds using the strategies I mentioned earlier of the wall alphabet with the pictures and the songs over the coming weeks. One letter my daughter had not mastered when she had almost the entire alphabet memorized was the letter G. So I invented a song or poem that had a lot of words starting with the letter G. It was a silly, nonsensical poem, but she liked it, and as I set her up to look for the letter G in the coming days, it worked and she memorized the letter. How did I set her up to look for that letter? I purposely put some new picture cards in her bag that started with the G sound, the G sound. And so then she was pulling those out and having to find the G on the wall and then go and find the G in the song. One more way that I almost forgot to mention to teach your children how to learn letter names and letter sounds is by the use of their name and the names of other members of your family or people that they're around frequently. An added benefit to this strategy is one, that they're learning what their name looks like and the letters of their name, and two, you want your child to begin to identify that words aren't just blocks, but they can be separated out into individual letters and manipulated as well, and that those letters can be found in different words. So here I have some of the names of the people in my son's life when he was learning the letter names and sounds. And when I start out this activity, I usually start out also having pictures of the people involved to match them with their given name. So he's starting to recognize them, and he's starting to look for them based on different aspects. One is the beginning sound. So mommy, as he starts to learn the sounds, he can recognize that mommy starts with and the letter that says is M, and he looks and he sees that the only one that starts with M is this one, and he starts to recognize it. Now, this is one strategy. These things should never be isolated to just that one strategy, because that will lead to weak reading. A concern that might pop up in your head if you know anything about reading instruction is, oh, is this going to be a whole language type lesson? Well, as you'll see through a few little steps I'm going to describe quickly here, absolutely not. If my child simply memorizes that this word is mommy and never understands that it's made up of separate letters that work in different ways, that is going to be problematic. So a couple of things that we do with that. One, we match the picture with the name of the person. We also start to identify different letters and their shapes and their sounds. One, you could be identifying letters that have a straight line going up and down, like this line in mommy, or lines going side to side, like in the E here. It could also be diagonal lines, circles, like this O. So you're looking for parts of letters. You can also look for the actual letter. So if today he says, I want to look for the letter E, we can be looking for the letter E in words, and he can go ahead and trace those letters. We can also be looking to look for capitals. So here I have a capital D, and he could trace the capital D and begin to recognize that all of these names begin with a capital, but don't have capitals throughout the rest of the name, except for here where there's two names to the person's name. Another thing that can be done over time is teaching your child to categorize. This will also lead into spelling later on when they're older and farther along in their reading process. So maybe I categorize my words by all the words that begin with the same letter. So here I have D, E, G, M, V, and A. And so my son has to guess why I have them in the groups that they do. Now, at first, you want to model this. They're not going to understand how to do this. So I might do this and be like, do you think you can figure it out? Let's see. I notice, and if they can't figure it out, then you show them, okay, I noticed that this one has all the same letter at the beginning, D, D, and D. This has an E, etc. Or perhaps you do it by the ending letter. I don't recommend doing more than 1 or 2 sorting activities with the names each time that you sit down with them. I think that would get a little overwhelming. Now, if you see them really getting into it and understanding it quickly and wanting to do more, that's fine. But in general, I don't think that that's necessarily going to be a great plan. Another way that could be all the words that have the letter E in them, for example. So here I have all the words that have the E, and I have all the words that don't have E. But there's a lot of different ways they can categorize it, and they're looking for different factors. They're reading the words a lot. They're playing with the letter sounds. Here's the M. Remember what M says? M says, Or to ask, do you remember what the V says? And if they do, they'll say it, and if they don't, then you say it. V. Oh yes, here's a T in Auntie Hypey. The T says T. Another thing that you could do is categorizing them by the number of letters. So, oh look, David has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters. Let's see how many letters Mommy has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look, those two could be in a group together. Okay, let's try Victoria. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Victoria has 8, so 8's not going to go with this one. Let's put it in a different group. And so here you're categorizing together and figuring out the groups. Categorization is also a really important skill for your child's brain, no matter what subject they're learning. It's going to help them to process and organize information in general as the years go on. So that's basically the idea, to reinforce what they're learning about letter names and letter sounds.